Chapter 1 of Good Girl. This book was set in 1994. Although they couldn't yet see the car, Shayna pulled out the remote and aimed in the car's direction to unlock the doors. "Oh, your daddy let you drive the Lex today? You go, girl," Kanisha exclaimed. "What about the Benz? Your mama got that one?" As they reached the car, each tossed their book bags into the back seat. Shayna took off her coat and put it in the back seat too. "Yeah, you know that. You'll never see me driving that one. My dad had to go to Columbia, so he drove my car." They each got inside and Shayna cranked the engine. "So let me finish telling you. So we went in Camelot because I wanted him to buy me something. I was standing there flipping through one of the shelves looking at that new Brian McKnight tape, and he was behind me rubbing all up on me and stuff, and I was just like," Kanisha rolled her eyes and sucked her teeth as if even the memory aggravated her. "And then when I found it, he didn't have enough money, so I still had to pay $2 and some change. But that didn't keep him from rubbing up on me at the checkout counter. Quan is so fine. You know, he has that mustache coming in and those eyes. He's so strong. He must have got a haircut because he was fine Saturday. I was rubbing his head and down his shoulders and stuff. He got so much muscles in his back. Ooh, he looked just like a sculpture." "Kanisha, please stop. I know where this story is going, and I still got to tell you what happened with me and Kendall over Christmas break." "No, Shayna, you got to hear the rest. This was good. I'm sure whatever happened with you and Kendall don't end like what happened with me and Quan." Shayna shook her head as she drove. "You're right about that. Hurry up." "So we walked back out into the mall part, and we were just walking. We weren't really talking or anything much, but he had his hand around my back. Then he put it in my waistband in the back. So we were just walking, and I wanted to go in that store with all the strange little, stupid kind of stuff they have in there, down on the end where JCPenney is. Well, I went to turn and go in that store, and I walked in front of him, and my arm accidentally touched near his, because I was swinging my arm, and well, he was ready. His jeans were holding him back, but he was ready. I went on in the store and looked around for a few minutes, and then he said he had to stop by the bathroom. I didn't have to go right then, so I waited outside while he went in. She paused and took a deep breath. Well, this other dude came out, and a minute later, I felt somebody grab my arm and pull me in that stank men's room. Shayna, Quan had his pants down, and you know how I dress. His back stayed up against the door to keep anyone else from coming in, and he held me like I was a big brown paper grocery bag with legs. Kanisha slapped her leg and laughed out loud like she couldn't get over the memory. "It was good, Shayna. It was real good. He's so strong. I've never had anyone hold me like that. And they came to a stop at a red light. I thought you said you always had protected sex," Shayna challenged as she interrupted. "I do. It was. Just because I didn't say exactly what hand he used to roll it down with, don't think I rode bareback. I don't do that kind of stuff. You know me better than that." Shayna rolled her eyes. "And how many does this make for you?" Now the light was green and they were moving again. "How many Quans does this make? I'm not sure I understand your question." Now Shayna was irritated. "You do understand, and that's not funny. Kanisha, keep it up. You're going to get something you won't be able to trace your way back to. You're going to get something the doctors ain't ever seen. Why you always got to lecture me?" "'Cause you're my friend, and I want you to cut it out. Why you always got to tell me about your escapades anyway? You know what I'm going to say." "Well, forget it, Shayna. I just wanted a high five from my friend, but just go ahead and tell me about Kendall." Kanisha's voice dropped off like she really didn't want to hear about him. She was just annoyed at the mini lecture she had just endured. "No, I'm not telling you about Kendall right now. I want to tell you about you." Kanisha sucked her teeth. "Oh, Lord, here it comes. Just because I told you doesn't mean I'm trying to make you do it. You can wait as long as you want. You can wait until your wedding night, or you can wait until your 5-year anniversary. That's up to you. I was just sharing what I experienced over Christmas break. You don't have to tell me about STTs, pregnancy, or going to hell, because I already know what you're going to say. You've said it before." "Well, you're my friend, and I don't want to see you get hurt, so I'm going to tell you again. No, I'm taking a different approach. No STDs, no pregnancy, and no hell. But Kanisha, there is more to life than sex. There's emotions you never felt because you always jump straight to the sex. There's love. There's commitment. Just because he's hard don't mean he's got to have sex. Kanisha, you think every erection has got to end inside of you. Well, it doesn't. You talk to me about waiting too long. You don't wait long enough. I mean, we became friends slowly. Why can't you get to know a guy slowly and let things grow into a loving, caring, trusting relationship? If you always jump straight to sex, you miss out on all the other important stuff. And I'm no therapist, but I don't think it's possible to start with sex, then go back and pick up love. You already jumped the gun. He knows what kind of girl you are, and no man wants that as his wife. He knows you aren't worth his love, and you'll never get his respect. And what if you get pregnant? Are you going to be able to tell the baby how much you love his father? No, you won't even know who the father is. Shane was pulling into the parking lot out in front of Kanisha's apartment. Kanisha took a deep breath and laid her head back on the headrest. You don't understand, Shayna. Once you have sex, you can't turn it down anymore. That's where I'm at. I know all about love and that other stuff, but right now I love sex. My body craves it. You would understand that if you weren't a virgin. I understand that, and my virginity doesn't have anything to do with it. My body sends me messages too, but I let my brain make my decisions. Let's say you do get married one day. If you don't learn how to say no, you'll be cheating on your husband every time some other man winks at you. You can't just say yes to any man anywhere. You got to set some limits for yourself. Kanisha, we just had our first day back at school from Christmas break. It's a new year, our senior year. That should be your resolution, to try and find somebody to love and stop having so much sex. Put yourself on a sex diet. Shut up. Everybody don't think like you. I'm going inside. Thanks for dropping me off, and I appreciate the lecture. Call me tonight, and you can tell me about Kendall. Okay, I'll see you. Kanisha got out, pushed her door closed. Shayna sat and waited until her friend was inside and had turned to wave. She rolled her eyes and shook her head before she backed out of the yard. Everybody did not think like Shayna Marshall. The biggest contrast could be found in her best friend, Kanisha Wilson. Shayna's older brother, Sean, always said, I can't see how you two can even be friends. What's wrong with her? I guess all that sperm she collects has started swimming to her brain. She is a horny nut. Can't you find somebody better to hang out with? Sean was 3 years older than his sister. As they reached their older teens, they became pretty close. No longer did they fight all the time. Now they hung out together and appreciated advice from one another. Sean graduated high school and entered UNC Charlotte as a freshman. After 2 rough semesters, his parents complaining about the grades he was making, he decided to drop out and get a job. His parents were distraught with disappointment about his decision. They never meant for him to drop out. They just wanted him to make better grades. It seemed every conversation since had centered on his going back to school. Shayna wanted him to re-enroll too, but she tried not to bring up the subject unless he mentioned it first. She knew her brother well enough to know that no amount of persuasion could change his mind. It would instead cause him to stop all communication, and she needed the door of communication with him to remain wide open for his sake and for hers. Sean was no dummy. He said he'd go back to school when he could pay his own tuition. That way the grades he made would be the grades he bought. As they got older, Shayna had also become closer with her younger sister, Sierra. She was 14 and in 8th grade. Her older siblings sometimes teased her by saying she had been their parents' slip-up. She was a sweet girl, not quite like Shayna, but outspoken and deliberate. Her dad teased her that he hated the day she learned to talk. She knew how to say exactly what she meant. She was the youngest of the Marshall children and for some reason could not seem to excel academically. Both Shayna and Sean had decent grades up through high school, but Sierra's problems began in 6th grade. She never seemed to adapt to the freedoms of middle school. The thought of her entering high school next year really worried her parents. In middle school, she was team taught by 4 teachers who shared all the same students. In high school next year, she would be on her own. Her mother was trying to alter her lackadaisical attitude about school in every way she could imagine. She had threatened to take all the TVs and phones out of the house except the ones in the master bedroom so she could better monitor her youngest child. Shayna sometimes worried about how her little sister would get along at home with just her parents next year. Sierra seemed to view Shayna somewhat as most girls view their mother. She was much more likely to talk to her older sister about her feelings than she would her mother. Shayna had observed this too, and she felt she had to work extra hard to be there for Sierra. Shayna worried that instead of just concentrating on her work, Sierra would become a rebel and get herself on perpetual punishment. Shayna tried to calculate just what it would cost to keep her sister supplied with phone cards so she could call when she needed to and keep her mouth shut and stop smarting off to their mom. They both could recall how things changed when Sean left for school. All that parental attention divided by 3 was divided among 2, which meant more interaction. Shayna could not visualize Sierra being very receptive to her parents treating her as their only child. That would be nothing but trouble. Frank and Dorothy Marshall were good people. They were known, trusted, and liked by everyone in Hilton, South Carolina, the city they called home for over 20 years. Both were South Carolina natives and both were immigrants to Hilton, but they had now grown to love the place, and they said they would probably never leave. The Marshalls were strict on their children because they wanted the best for them and from them. Frank and Dorothy were both content in their undertakings, but they wanted their children to surpass their accomplishments and do even greater things. They saw this potential in each of their children and would accept nothing less. They had attended school during the 1950s and 60s when schools were segregated and later during the Civil Rights Movement, but they still managed to succeed. The Marshalls wanted more than mediocrity from their children, who were not faced with a fraction of the adversity they themselves faced when they were educated, searched for employment, and entered entrepreneurship. They both held master's degrees, Dorothy a human resource management degree from the College of Charleston. She was a personnel director for the Hilton School District. She had interviewed and recommended for hire almost all of her children's teachers. Dorothy had taught English at Hilton High School for 12 years before moving to the district office. She believed that the teaching profession was one of the most honorable professions one could enter. She thought the job of imparting relevant knowledge to the next generation was paramount. Dorothy thought that every good teacher should be able to motivate the lower achieving students, explain content in a variety of stimulating ways, and that all teachers should model good citizenship in the community. In her time as personnel director, she had persuaded the school board to approve 2 new initiatives she thought would ensure high-quality teachers. First, all teacher candidates were required to submit to a drug test, and all district employees were subject to random drug testing. No random drug testing had ever been administered, but she had seen it through the approval stage. Secondly, all teachers were to have their contract renewed in good standing. Ms. Marshall took her job very seriously as she took each applicant through a rigorous interview and recommended only a select few to the school principals for a secondary interview. Dorothy was a devout Christian, and she sought to please God with all of her endeavors. It was illegal to ask about one's faith in an interview, but she alluded to it. She despised the day when prayer had been taken out of public schools. Each school offered a moment of silence after the morning announcements, and she encouraged her children to use this time each day to pray. She hoped all the teachers, especially the ones she had hired, were using this time to pray too. Frank had graduated from MIT with a civil engineering degree. He was very business-minded and never intended to make a career working as anyone's employee. The reason they decided to move to Hilton was due to his research. Frank believed that competition was the only way a company would truly Frank believed that competition was the only way a company would truly measure its own quality and put forth the best product. He wasn't stuck on any particular industry, but he wanted to move into a community that had only one of some industry and open a competitor. He found that Hilton had only one concrete supplier, Crete Works, and the demand for concrete was high, enough so that Crete Works might need a rival. He studied how the population of Hilton was growing yearly, its industrial trends, and decided that Hilton needed Marshall Concrete to come into the area and compete with Crete Works. 15 years later, the population was still growing rapidly, and Marshall Concrete, with its red and white trucks, was a supplier of concrete for over half of the new projects in the city. At some point, he wanted to turn the business over to his son, but had told Ch1 that the only way he could possibly run things was with a college degree. Frank, too, was a Christian and a deacon at Hilton Community Baptist Church. He and his wife had happily been married for 22 years, which qualified them to hold the premarital counseling sessions for engaged couples. Ch1, Shayna, and Sierra had high standards to meet. Shayna was a pretty good student, not great, but above average. She generally did her work. She had never been a straight A student, except in third grade, but that year her teacher mistakenly left her name off the list, and she didn't get to go on the field trip with the other honor students. Her dad went to the school to sit down with the principal about that blunder, and she received a letter of apology from the school district superintendent, which she now kept in her scrapbook. While she had failed some assignments in her schooling, she had never earned a failing grade on her report card. She had been accepted to some good colleges, but was not very hopeful for scholarship money. Shayna would be graduating in June and planned to stay in-state so it would cost less. She thought about this the way her parents would not aggravate her like they did her brother. They seemed to feel that they had obviously failed in the parental guidance of Ch1, and now they aimed to right all their wrongs with their two daughters.